Cub and I did an episode years back called Sharpen the Saw. It was episode 12, done in 2020. And I didn't listen to it over again, so it's not top of mind exactly everything we talked about, but the idea is, it comes from, I don't even remember what book it was. I think it was like the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I think it's called. They were talking about this concept of the idea of sharpening a saw. It's like developing your skills so that you're better at getting things done. So if you're going to cut something, taking some time to sharpen the saw first will make the cutting easier. And there's also a quote by, I think it's an Abraham Lincoln quote. It says, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe." And so when you think about that in your life in general, it's about sort of developing your skills or developing yourself in order to make the things you want to accomplish easier, more efficient, or do a better job at those things. And so the reason that I wanted to revisit this topic is because I was listening to a podcast, and one of the guys mentioned a book called How to Read a Book. And I was like, that's fucking funny. If you think about it, you're reading a book about how to read a book. And then it got me thinking about that concept. And it's like, if you think about, I read a lot of books in order to try to sharpen my axe, to try to make myself better in order to have more skills and more knowledge in order to be able to lead a better life and do the things that I want to do better. And I was like, it's just so interesting to think, if I'm reading books to sharpen my axe, and then there's a book about how to read books better, that's a whole different layer, of doing that. It's kind of like if you think about just the actual idea of sharpening an axe to cut a tree down. So like cutting down a tree with an axe is a skill, and then sharpening the axe will make you more efficient at doing that job. But then what if you took some time to learn how to properly sharpen the axe? Like, is that a whole nother layer of development, And so I wrote out some stuff. So I'm going to go through some general ideas of the overall idea of sharpening the axe. And then I want to give you some examples of kind of like the sort of second layer of it. Am I explaining that right? Sort of like the other layer that I'm talking about. So like the idea of like reading books to improve yourself, and then reading a book about reading books to get better at the reading of books. I don't know. I'm kind of getting a little twisted here, but hopefully it all comes together. We'll see. All right. So let's jump into it. We could start off talking about graffiti, and you can look at it a couple different ways. Like the way I was thinking of it is like, you could spend some time in your black books and all this kind of stuff and developing different styles and all that shit. But if you don't have certain fundamentals in place, like can control and things like that, and some certain knowledge, that's kind of like a version of sharpening the axe. But you could also look at it like you could have a strong foundation in kind of the basics, like the skills, can control and stuff like that. But without the sort of knowledge of some of the history, the ethics or kind of rules of the game and shit like that, that's kind of leaving out fundamental components that are going to help you move forward. So I guess you could look at it in 2 different ways. I kind of look at it like the can control and sort of like the basics of like the tools and all that kind of stuff. That's sharpening the axe, and then developing the styles and all that stuff. You could have all the best styles on paper, but if you don't have sort of the fundamentals on how to use a can and like what the different caps do and just sort of basic shit like that, you can have the best letters in the world, but if you can't proportion them and you can't paint them clean, or you can't do the things with spray paint, it doesn't really work out. But I guess you could look at it from both sides. And so another easy one to talk about is like physical and mental health. You can think about how physical health, you might not think like that's going to affect your creativity or your graffiti or certain aspects. Like some people might think, I don't need to be in good physical shape to be successful in business or have a good relationship or all these kind of things. And that's partially true. I mean, I'm sure there's tons of examples of people that are way out of shape and they have successful relationships and they have successful businesses, but if you look at the effects of being healthy and how that affects your mental health, that's also going to affect your clarity. It's going to affect you know, how well you sleep. It's going to affect all these kind of things. So, and a sort of way of sharpening your axe, meaning like your body, that's the thing that's going to produce all the results, regardless of what it is. If you're not taking the time to take care of yourself, you're sort of polluting yourself with shitty food or shitty, you know, cigarettes or alcohol or drugs or all these kind of things. You're sort of holding yourself back and kind of dulling your axe, where you might be able to get these things done, but you could probably get it done better if you take the time to get yourself in better condition. And if your goal is better mental health, then better physical health is directly related to that. So there's a lot of different ways of looking at it in regards to mental health or physical health or vice versa. So another idea around sharpening the axe is just general skill development and continuous learning. So, you know, a lot of times we could probably get stuck, and I feel like I'm kind of like that in some aspects of my life where, you know, like a lot of things that I'm doing, I'm continuously trying to learn. Like right now, you know, my main focus is growing this business and doing all this kind of stuff. So a lot of my learning is in leadership and systems and different business things and all this kind of shit that's going to help get that business to where I want to get it to. And I'm also taking seriously getting myself in physical shape or maintaining at least a good, I don't want to say maintaining, because I'm really trying to get better at 50 years old. Like I want to be, I'm in good shape, but I want to be better. So I'm really working on that and trying to find ways to improve myself in order to do all the things that I just talked about and be able to run my business better, be a better example for my team. And, you know, if you guys are paying attention, I want to be a better example for you. And, you know, I know getting in better physical shape is going to help all that stuff. But at the same time, you know, like I'm really passionate about graffiti, but I'm not doing a whole lot in the area of learning. I mean, I'm doing stuff, but like it's definitely not at the same level as reading about things related to business and personal development and, you know, sharpening my skills in that area. I could definitely be putting more effort towards, I don't know, developing more skills and going more down the continuous learning path than I have been. And I have picked up stuff over the years. I mean, I started doing bevels at, I don't know, 2017, and I started writing in 91. So, I mean, I'm doing new shit here and there, but it's like, I think it was 2017. That was a long time ago, you know. We all kind of get stuck. I mean, I can't say all of us, but I feel like we all could have a tendency to sort of get stuck in our ways and kind of keep doing things the same way. And even in physical health, like continuous learning about nutrition and what kind of workouts to do to maximize your results and all this kind of stuff. Like, so, you know, continuously developing your skills and continuously learning is probably one of the best ways you can apply this concept. So with that, and kind of circling back to the original opening kind of concept, like the power of reading and education, I've probably grown, well, not probably, I know I have. I've grown more in the last, I don't know, I don't even know how many years, maybe 5-6 years, from reading and implementing things that I've read than I can remember for, I don't even know how to really relate it, but I've just done a lot of growth and I've learned a ton of shit from reading. And so that's why I found it so interesting, this book. And at first, when I bought the book, How to Read a Book, I was like, this is probably going to be super boring, but I'm actually like really, really enjoying it. It's super interesting. They're talking about all this different shit, different ways to read, and even like stuff that I hadn't thought about, like a couple of examples. One, they said to really study the table of contents so that you get an idea of the structure. And I never do that. So like, I usually hear like, oh, this is a good book. And then based on the title and the blurb, or maybe the author is somebody that I've read stuff before, I'm like, all right, cool, I'll check it out. And I just start reading and I kind of figure out what I'm in for as I go. And sometimes I'll get pretty far into the book and I'll be like, man, I don't even really want to finish this. Like I'll be halfway through and I've invested all this time and realize that I'm just not really interested in what it is. And so they talk about this idea of like, there's 4 levels of reading, and I don't really remember them enough to talk about it here, but one of the levels, they explain that sort of idea of like preparing yourself to read the book. So you give yourself a short amount of time to look at the table of contents, see what the structure's about, read the blurb, read any kind of like the preface or preface. I don't know how to say that. The first part of the book. And then they even said like flip through and just read a paragraph here and there and, sort of spend like 20 minutes, a half hour, an hour or something like that. And that'll give you a pretty good idea of what the book is about. It'll also give you an idea if you actually want to read it. And so when you do that process, if I had done that and I had made that a practice of mine, I probably would have saved a lot of time on a lot of books that I probably didn't even really care to read. And then they also said, if you're reading a hard book, like a complicated book, something that has a lot of stuff in there that you don't understand, especially like language you don't understand. We were sort of taught, this is what they say. I don't really remember learning to read in school. I know I did, but I barely fucking remember that. But they're saying that the way we're taught is like, as you're reading, if there's something you don't understand, to pause and try to find the information you need. So if you need to identify a word or something like that, they said, you learn to sort of stop and try to solve that problem before you move on. And the way that this book was written, I think in 1940, and then it was revised in 1970. So it's a pretty old book. And one thing that I would never have thought of is they said, if you do that first thing and you decide this is a book you want to read, and it turns out to be sort of above your skill level or there's language in there you don't understand, they said to read through the whole book anyway and just read past, just keep reading even if you're not understanding. And then the stuff that you do understand will stick. And then when you read it again, then you're going to have a much better understanding. So I never would have thought of that. I'm only like fucking, I don't even know, maybe 10% into this book. So I'm not really going to make this about that particular book, but it was the overall concept that sort of kind of got my ideas flowing with bringing this concept back. So that's the overall idea of sharpening the saw and some different examples of like taking some time to develop the skills. And so now I just want to spend a little time just giving you some examples of that extra layer that I was talking about, because that part I find really interesting. So just sort of to get us heading in the right direction, like a couple of examples, like I think I said this already, but I'll say it again. Chopping down a tree is a skill. Sharpening the axe is going to help you get better, but then also taking it a level further and learning the actual skill of axe sharpening. I've never sharpened an axe. I don't know if it's complicated or not, but I'm sure there is a better way to do it. And maybe like the Abraham Lincoln thing saying he's going to spend 4 hours to sharpen his axe. Maybe if you spend some time learning how to sharpen an axe, maybe it won't take that long. I don't know. I mean, kind of taking that concept, that quote out of context. But anyway, another example is the thing that I was talking about is like reading. I use reading to sharpen my axe, which is like me and my own personal development. But then learning to read is like another layer to get better at that. So I have a few examples here. I'll run through those. I'm kind of hoping to kind of get you thinking like along the lines of, let's say you say, okay, yeah, I want to sharpen the axe. And one of the things that's really holding me back is my physical fitness. And like, I know I was in this position at one point, and I'm not like some expert now, but I know a lot more than I did when I very first wanted to get in shape. And when I first got in shape in my 20s, it actually worked out really well, but I was also in my 20s, it's like, it's a lot easier to lose weight and put on muscle then. So I didn't know shit about any of this stuff, and I didn't know shit about nutrition. So the way I did it was like, I lived in this crappy apartment, and they had this little gym with like, the sort of generic kind of machines in there. And so my workouts were basically, I hated doing it. So I would just go in there and I'd be like, I'm going to do three rounds of everything in here, And so I used the bench press machine. There was like a curl thing and like just different stuff. I don't remember exactly everything, but I just did like, I don't remember. It was like 10 reps and three rounds. So whatever that was. And I just did all that shit as fast as possible. And then for nutrition, I wanted to lose weight. That was one of my primary goals because I was probably like 40, 50 pounds overweight at the time. And so at the time, this was like, I think it was like probably 99, I think around 99, 2000, something like that. And so all I really knew was like these diet shakes. I don't even know if they still exist, called Slim Fast. So I would drink 2 of those and then I would eat a meal. And this was long before I was vegan. So my meal was a chicken breast and a baked potato because somebody told me that that's like what bodybuilders ate. And I don't know if that's true or not. So that's what I did. And I didn't really know what I was doing. So kind of getting off track. But the point of that whole story is like, I was doing all that stuff to sharpen my axe, but then I could have taken it a level further and learned about what exercises to do and what nutrition to do. I mean, granted, the shit worked and I actually got in really good shape, but I really think it was more about being in my 20s than anything. So, but nowadays I do read a lot more about physical fitness and nutrition and all these kind of things. So I do have a better understanding. So that's a second layer. You can say, I want to get in shape. So the 2 things you got to do is eat better or eat less and fucking move your body. So then the next layer is actually learning, like, what are some ways I can optimize that shit? So anyway, let me get into these examples. So if you think about critical thinking and problem solving, so like the first layer is engaging in activities that develop critical thinking and problem solving skills, like puzzles, strategic games. I don't do any of this kind of stuff, but in my research, I found some of this stuff, or complex problem or project planning. There's another one. So you can go another layer deeper than that and say you could study the art of problem solving itself, like reading books about logic and reasoning and creative problem solving. So that's like taking it another layer. So I already covered the physical fitness. That's next on my list. So I'll skip that one. But it was basically, regular exercise routines and shit like that. But then the next layer down is actually educating yourself on all this kind of actual exercise and nutrition and things like that. And then you could really optimize the results. So taking that sharpening to a next level. So kind of back to graffiti, I kind of go back and forth on what the first layer is, but what I have written down here is like the first layer could be practicing techniques like can control and lettering and colors, color theory and stuff like that. The way I use color theory is I pop open a color wheel and I look at what's on the opposite sides of shit and kind of try to figure that out. But that's pretty limiting. But anyway, so then you could take that a level deeper by studying like principles of visual perception and design, like composition and balance and contrast and all these kind of things. And so that'll enhance your artistic quality. So these are kind of things that maybe a lot of times we don't think about as graffiti writers unless we're sort of like moving up into the art world. But maybe that is stuff. And like, for example, for me, I know like, if you look at like chapters of my graffiti shit, like the 90s was one chapter, the 2000s was kind of like, well, it was another chapter, but it was like I don't know, I guess 2000 to like, I would say 2015, even though it's kind of a 15-year chapter of kind of like weird, I don't know what the fuck I want to do, and like 15 years of just kind of like fumbling around. But well, maybe like up until 2014. 2014, I got pretty serious about it again, and I've been going pretty strong for the last 10 years. But the first chapter was mainly just doing graffiti type shit. And then I went to college and I studied design and started doing all of this different kind of stuff. I learned about color theory. I learned about composition, through graphic design. And when I got out and I tried to get back into graph, I didn't implement any of that shit that I learned into graffiti until much later. And so now I implement more things like wabi-sabi and stuff that I learned doing 3D animation and 3D modeling and stuff. So you can see my first chapter of graffiti was sort of like the first layer of doing like just the normal kind of graffiti stuff. And then this current chapter is more about implementing different things that I learned from other areas, you know. Hopefully that makes sense. So another one I wanted to talk about is like professional development. So like shit like, you know, you get a job and they train you and they teach you how to do all the shit that you do at your job. And then you just do that. And you don't, a lot of people just don't really try to push themselves past that. So it's kind of like getting trained or watching the videos they have you watch or the courses you have to take or whatever that training looks like in order to be able to do your job effectively. That's the first layer. But then you can go much, much further by mastering different techniques, you know, shit like memory enhancement. Like I probably should fucking work on that, like speed reading or different kind of things that are going to take your learning to the next level, or even just the idea of, you know, you have your on the job training and then you're actually taking it another level and sort of learning about different aspects of the job that maybe you didn't learn while you were there. And you're kind of like developing more skills, like shit that's outside of what they taught you. So the last one I want to talk about is mental health and like mindfulness, because that's something I found was incredibly helpful. And so like the first layer, you could practice mindfulness. So that could be through meditation, which is like my favorite way to practice it. But then it could also be like single tasking, you know, let's say you're going to go for a walk. Instead of going for a walk and like looking at shit on your phone or, you know, having a conversation with somebody or anything, like just be doing that. And that's kind of a form of meditation. You could kind of focus on, you know, the world around you. You could, you know, be mindful of everything that's happening, be mindful of like how your feet feel on the asphalt or the trail or whatever you're, you know, wherever you're walking. And so the idea of meditation, let's say like for me, for example, I learned, you know, how to focus on your breath. And that's kind of like a way to sort of clear out your thoughts and kind of be in that zone. But then you can take it another layer and learn about things like neuroscience. Jesus Christ. They're going crazy when I'm trying to record. You can learn about neuroscience, like how the brain works, neuroplasticity, and all this kind of crazy shit. I find that stuff helpful, even though like I feel like I have an understanding of pretty basic understanding of it. But I do find that at the very least, learning that you can like alter your brain and kind of improve it and do all these kind of things, that taking it that next layer, it definitely helps in a lot of ways. A lot of it is sort of, you know, about encouragement. You know, it makes me, I don't know, how do I explain this? Like when I first started meditating, I found that it was helpful, but I didn't realize like I was actually improving my brain by doing shit like that. So taking it another layer deeper and actually learning why this stuff is helpful, and that'll also lead you into different techniques and kind of reading onto different things that'll maybe give you different ideas on stuff to try and actually make a lot more progress because you took it that next layer. Okay, so that I feel like all over the place on that shit. So hopefully it all made sense. So like to summarize it, just the overall idea is like sharpening the saw is like taking the time you need to be able to develop whatever skills or prepare yourself for whatever you're going to do in order to do that thing better. And then the other layer that I'm talking about is like learning more about the shit that you're sharpening. So like the stuff about, you know, I read books to sharpen my axe, meaning improve myself, but then reading a book about how to read books better. Or another example is like just the idea of educating yourself. There's a book called Limitless by Jim Quick, and it's another sort of example of this. So you could say like, yeah, I want to continuously develop and learn all these new things. That's one layer. And then you could say, all right, I'm going to read Jim Quick's book because the whole book is like teaching you how to learn. So I think it's a really interesting idea, and hopefully it makes sense, and hopefully it kind of sparks some ideas to sort of get you heading down the path. I would just love to see more people taking the time to improve themselves and, just being a better example to everybody around you. So, all right, that's all I got. Appreciate you guys, and I will see you next time. All right, good.
Appreciate each and every one of you guys who are supporting the cause and continue to spread the love. And stay up.